Today I'll be taking you through the Math No Calculator section of SAT Practice Test 8. I'll be giving you tips and tricks that will hopefully help you become more efficient during the SAT Math section. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. Question 1. In the equation above, what is the value of x? So we have to solve for x. Well, we have 3x plus x plus x plus x, and we know that that will give us 3x plus 3x, which will be 6x. And then we have minus 3 minus 2, which is negative 3 minus 2, which will give us minus 5. And that will equal 7 plus x, and we know that x plus x gives us 2x. So we have 7 plus 2x on our right side of the equation. So now we're going to go ahead and isolate our x onto one side. So we subtract 2x from each side to keep x positive, which is just easier. You don't necessarily have to, but it makes it easier. So 6x minus 2x gives us 4x. We add 5 to each side. 7 plus 5 gives us 12, so we have 4x equals 12. We divide each side by 4 to isolate x. We get x equals 12 over 4, which is equal to 3. So D is our answer. Question 2. The graph above shows the distance traveled d in feet by a product on a conveyor belt m minutes after the product is placed on the belt. Which of the following equations correctly correlates d and m? Well, if we look at our graph, we see that d is 6 when m is 3. So when m is 3, d is 6. Well, that means our d, 6, is 2 times our m of 3, right? So that means our d equals 2m, because when we plug in 6 for d, we get 2 times our 3m, right? So we know that this equation is right. And really it's just asking for our slope, right? Our slope's 2. So we know that we're going to have, and we know our slope's 2 because we see we rise 2 when we go over 1. So our equation will be d equals 2m, which will be A. Question 3. The formula below is often used by project managers to compute E, the estimated time to complete a job, where O is the shortest completion time, P is the longest completion time, and M is the most likely completion time. Which of the following correctly gives P in terms of E, O, and M? Alright, so all we got to do is set the equation to where P is equal to it, right? So we're going to go ahead and multiply both sides by 6. So now we have 6E equals O plus 4M plus P. So we have to isolate P, so we're going to go ahead and subtract O, and we'll subtract 4M as well. We have to do that from each side. And now we're left with P equals 6E minus O minus 4M. Right, now we just find which equation matches that, and we see that equation A matches that. So our answer will be A. Question 4. In the figure above, RT equals TU, so we'll go ahead and make sure that we put lines on that to indicate that they're equivalent in length. What is the value of x? Okay, so we're solving for angle x. Well, we see we have 31 here, and we know that our angle at TRU, so this angle here, is going to be the same as angle RUT, right? Because it's an isosceles triangle, so we know that this angle here and this angle here will be the same. So these two angles. So now we know we have a 114 degree angle there, and we know that angles in a triangle add to 180. So we can do 180 minus 114 will equal 2 times, we're going to call this angle y, right? Y degrees. And it'll be the same here and here. So that's going to equal 2 times our y degrees, right? So now we go ahead and do that, and we'll see we get 180 minus 114. That'll leave us with 66 equals 2y. We divide each side by 2 to isolate y. 66 over 2 is 33, so we know angle y equals 33. So we'll go ahead and plug that in. So we'll have 33 and 33. Okay, now we see that we have to solve for angle x here, right? So what we need to do is we need to solve for this angle here, because once we have that, we can do 180 minus this angle right here to get angle x. Well, we see we have 31 and we have 33, and we know the angles in a triangle add to 180. So we can do 180 minus 31 minus 33 equals, we'll call this one angle, we'll call it angle Z. Will equal our angle Z. So now what we can go ahead and do is we can go ahead and say negative 31 minus 33. Well, that gets us minus 64. So we have 180 minus 64. 180 minus 64 gives us 116. So 116 degrees will equal our angle Z, which we called right here. So we can go ahead and put that in. So we have 116 degrees. Well, now we can go ahead and solve for x by doing 180 degrees, because we know that this is on a line, and if it's on a line, that line is going to be 180 degrees total around here. So we'll do 180 degrees minus 116 degrees will give us our angle x. 180 minus 116 leaves us with 64 degrees equals angle x. So our answer is C. Question 5. The width of a rectangular dance floor is W feet. The length of the floor is 6 feet longer than the width. So we know L, our length, is equal to our W plus 6. Which of the following expresses the perimeter in feet of the dance floor in terms of W? Well, we know our perimeter, which I'll just say is P, is 2 times W plus 2 times L. And we know that L is W plus 6, so we can plug in W plus 6 for L. Now we multiply our 2 by our W and by our plus 6 to get 2W plus 2W plus 2 times 6, which is 12. So we can simplify that to 4W plus 12, which is B. Question 6. Which of the following consists of the y-coordinates of all points that satisfy the system of inequalities above? Alright, so we have to find the y-coordinates of all the points that satisfy the system of inequalities above. So what we're going to do, we see that we're given 2x, and we're given that it must be greater than 5. So we can go ahead and plug in 5 for 2x here. So we have y is greater than 5 minus 1. Well, we know 5 minus 1 is 4, so we can say y must be greater than 4, which is B. Question 7. What is the solution set of the equation above? Alright, so what we're going to do here is we have to get our square root on one side with nothing else on it. So we have to subtract 4 from each side. So 4 minus 4 gives us 0. X plus 3, we're subtracting 4 from 3. 3 minus 4 gives us negative 1. So we have x minus 1 equals the square root of 2x plus 6. We square each side to get rid of our square root. So when we're squaring x minus 1, we got to remember that we're multiplying our x minus 1 by x minus 1. We're not just squaring x and squaring negative 1. That's wrong. So what we do here is we're going to go and use FOIL. So we're going to do x times x gives us x squared. And then x times negative 1 gives us minus x. And then we have our negative 1 times x, which gives us another negative x. And then we have our negative 1 times negative 1, which will give us positive 1. So now what we're going to do, we're going to go ahead and simplify. We get x squared minus 2x plus 1. And that will equal our 2x plus 6. Alright, so now we got to solve for x. So to solve for x, we're going to go ahead and get everything on one side, set it equal to 0, and then factor it out to find our zeros. And then we'll take our zeros, we'll check them in. Alright, we'll check them in for our solution. And if it works, then it's our answer. But if it doesn't, then we can't use it, right? So we'll go ahead and get everything on one side. So we subtract 2x from each side. And then we go ahead. We have negative 2x minus 2x gives us negative 4x. We can drop our x squared down. We subtract 6 from each side. 1 minus 6 gives us minus 5. Okay, so now we're factoring, right? So we have x squared minus 4x minus 5. So we're looking for factors of negative 5 that add to 4. So I'll go ahead and put this over here. Factors of negative 5 that add to 4. Or I'm sorry, factors of negative 5 that add to negative 4. Alright, so we know factors of negative 5 are negative 5 and 1. And we know we have to have our negative 5 and then 1. Negative 5 plus 1 equals negative 4, right? So that means we'll have x minus 5 times x plus 1. So those will be our factors, which means that our zeros will be x equals 5 and x equals negative 1, because you take your factor and you set it equal to 0. But since we know that by setting equal to 0, we're just going to get the inverse of negative 5, so 5, and then 1 would be negative 1. We can just go ahead and say x equals 5 and x equals negative 1. So now we have to check these in with our original equation. So why don't we go ahead and check negative 1? Well, 2 times negative 1, 2 times negative 1 would give us negative 2, and then negative 2 plus 6 will give us 4. So we would have root 4, which will equal 2. So I'm going to go ahead and cross this out, and I'm just going to put 2. 2 plus 4 would give us 6. Alright, so we have 6 there, and that would equal x, which we said x was negative 1. We said x was negative 1, so we'd have negative 1 plus 3. Well, negative 1 plus 3, that's 2. 2 does not equal 6. So we can go ahead and we can eliminate any answer with negative 1 as x. Answer D has 0. which 0 wasn't one of our options, so we know that 5 must be our correct answer. Question 8. Which of the following expressions is equivalent to f of x divided by g of x for x is greater than 3? Alright, so we're going to go ahead and do our f of x, and we're going to factor it out, right? Because we can. We see that we have x cubed minus 9x. Well, what do we know about that? We know we can factor out x, because x is in x cubed and minus 9x, and then we're left with x squared minus 9. Well, what do we know about x squared minus 9? We can see that that's the difference of perfect squares when it's simplified, right? Because we know that that'd be x times x plus 3 times x minus 3. Okay? It's good to be able to recognize patterns like that because they're important and they can save you a lot of time. So if you recognize that x squared minus 9 can be factored into x plus 3 and x minus 3 because our plus 3x and our minus 3x cancel and we're left with negative 9 and x squared, that's going to help you out a lot being able to recognize those factor patterns, okay? Alright, so now we have our top simplified. Now we're going to go ahead and factor out our bottom equation, right? Well, our bottom equation, we see we need factors of negative 3 that add to negative 2. So I'm going to go ahead and put this over here. We need factors of negative 3 that add to negative 2. Well, since we're adding to negative 2, we know we have to have negative 3 plus 1 as our factors, which means that we'll have x minus 3 times x plus 1. Well, what do we know now? We can go ahead and put that in our denominator, so x minus 3 times x plus 1. Well, what do we see that we can do? We see we can go ahead and cancel x minus 3 and x minus 3, and that we're left with x times x plus 3 all over x plus 1, which means that our answer will be D. Question 9. In the xy plane, the graph of the equation above is a circle. Point P is on the circle and has coordinates 10 and negative 5. If line PQ is the diameter of the circle, what are the coordinates of point Q? Well, we know our equation for a circle is x minus h squared plus x minus k squared equals 16, where our center is hk. Or I'm sorry, equals r squared. I substituted in, but equals r squared, right? Well, then we know that our 16, if we square root it, gives us 4 as our radius. Well, what do we know? We know PQ is a diameter. A diameter is 2 times our radius, so 2r. We know our radius is 4. 2 times 4 is 8, so 8's our diameter. And we're given point P as 10 and negative 5. Well, if we think about it, if we're going to go ahead and graph this, right? We have 10 and negative 5. So I'll go ahead and find this. We'll call this 10. And then we'll go down. We'll just call this point 10, negative 5, which it says is P, right? Okay. Well, we also have our center. We see our center is going to be H is 6 and K as negative 5, right? So we're going to have 6 here, and it's also going to be at negative 5. So we'll call our center point C, right? Well, we know that our diameter is 8, and we know that it's a line, right? Well, if we know our diameter is 8, and we know that our point P, right, its y value is negative 5, and so is our center. We know that we pass through our center, and we know our distance from 10 to 6 is 4. Our y doesn't change, so our total distance traveled so far is 4. Well, we have to travel another 4 because our diameter is 8, so another 4 from 6 is 2. So we already know now that our x point has to be 2 and our y point has to be negative 5. So our answer will be A. And I'll go ahead and label that as point Q down here. Question 10. A group of 202 people went on an overnight camping trip taking 60 tents with them. Some of the tents held 2 people each. We're going to call X 2-person tents. And the rest held 4 people each. We're going to call Y 4-person tents. Assuming all the tents were filled to capacity and every person got to sleep in a tent, exactly how many tents were 2-person tents? Alright, so we're solving for X, right? Well, we know we have 60 tents in total, so X plus Y equals 60. And we also know that our 2, because we have 2 people for every X tent, so 2X plus 4 times every 4-person tent has to equal our 202 people there. So now what we can go ahead and do is we can just go ahead and solve, right? So we're asked to solve for X. Well, what I see I can do is I can actually just go ahead and I can multiply my equation here on top by 4 to give me 4y, and then I can just subtract, and that'll let me solve for x. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I'm going to do it like this. I'm going to go to the right here so you can see it better. So 4 times x will give me 4x, 4 times y will give me plus 4y, 4 times 60, 4 times 60 gives me 240. And now I'm going to go ahead and subtract my second equation, which will be 2x plus 4y equals 202. Well, 4x minus 2x leaves me with 2x, 4y minus 4y leaves me with 0, and 240 minus 202 leaves me with 38. I divide each side by 2. I get x equals 38 over 2, which is 19. Right, and that's something that you want to look for, right? A lot of times with math, what you can do is you can just take these equations that at first glance seem like they might take a while to solve, and like you might have to solve for x and then y, and you can kind of just work it out so you can just solve for x without having to solve for y, right? So you want to look for patterns like that where you see you can stack your equations like this and then multiply or divide to go ahead and eliminate the variable you don't need and immediately solve for x. So that'll save you a lot of time if you learn how to recognize that. So that's important to know. Question 11. Which of the following could be the equation of the graph above? Alright, well, looking at this equation, what do I know? Well, I know that it's not x squared, because an x squared equation will look like that, or it'd look like that, but it's not going to have these bumps here, right? It's not going to go like that. So anything x squared, I can get rid of. I know it's not an x equation, because that's just a linear equation like that, so I know it's not x. I know it's not an x cubed equation, because an x cubed equation would look like this, right? It has one end opening up and one end opening down. These ends, they both open up. So I can go ahead and get rid of my x cubed, right? So I know that's not the answer. Well, I see A. I have x times x, which will give me x squared, and times x again. Well, that's an x cubed equation, which can't be right. I see in C, I have x times x, and then times x again. So that's an x cubed equation. So that can't be right. I look at B. We have x squared times x times x. That's going to be x to the fourth, which can be right. And then I see D. We have x squared times x times x. It's also x to the fourth, right? So I know that I'm between B and D. Now I look at my zeros. I have a 0 at -3, and I have a 0 at 2. So I know what I can do is I can go ahead and say at -3, I know that that's going to be x plus 3 equals 0. So a factor will be x plus 3, and that's because we would go ahead and we'd subtract 3 from each side, and we'd see x would equal -3. And then I see I have a 0 at 2. Well, 0 at 2 means I'm going to have x minus 2 equals 0, right? Because if I add 2 to each side, I get x equals 2, right? So now I have my two factors. My two factors are going to be x plus 3 and x minus 2. Alright, so which equation has that between B and D? Well, I see that equation B has it. So my answer will be B. Question 12. If 2a divided by b equals 1/2, what is the value of b over a? Alright, I'm going to go ahead and solve for a and b, and then just solve for b over a. So I got 2a equals 1. I know my b is 2. I can go ahead and put that in, right? Because all I did was I just took my equation here, set it equal here. So I know 2a equals 1. I divide each side by 2. I get a equals 1/2. Now I got to solve for b over a. I know b is 2. I know a is 1/2. So what do we do when we divide by a fraction? We do our 2 over 1, and then we multiply by our reciprocal. Our reciprocal is going to be 2 over 1. And what do we get? We get 4. So our answer is going to be D. Question 13. Oil and gas production in a certain area dropped from 4 million barrels in 2000 to 1.9 million barrels in 2013. Okay, I see we dropped from 4 million to 1.9. That's a drop of negative 2.1 million barrels. And I see that that occurred from 2000 to 2013, so over 13 years. Now I move on and I read the rest. Assuming that the oil and gas production decreased at a constant rate. Okay, I already made that assumption. Which of the following linear functions f best models the production in millions of barrels t years after the year 2000? Okay, well, we know t is going to be our variable here, and we know that we start with 4 million and we lose 2.1 million divided by the 13 years. Well, I see that we don't want to have a decimal point in here, so I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to multiply only, wrong button, I'm going to multiply only this by 10, right? So I can go ahead and get rid of my decimal. When I do that, I'm going to do negative 2.1 times 10, well, that just gives me negative 21, and then 13 times 10 over 130. So I have negative, and that's f of t, right? So f of t equals negative 21 over 130t. Well, a and b are out because they're increasing. And then I see c is my only equation that matches what I have, so my answer is going to be c. Question 14. How many solutions are there to the system of equations above? Okay, well, what do I see here? I see I'm given y. That means I can just plug in my equation for y and solve for x, right? So I'll go ahead and do that. So I'm going to do x squared, because I'm just going to go ahead and substitute my top equation in for y. So I'll have x squared plus 3x. I see I'm going to have minus 5x here, so minus 5x. And then I have my negative 7 up top, and then plus 8. And that equals 0. So I simplify down, I have x squared plus 3x minus 5x, well that's minus 2x. And then minus 7 plus 8, well that's plus 1, equals 0. So now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and see if I can factor this out. So I need factors of 1 that add to negative 2. Well, factors of 1 that add to negative 2 are going to be negative 1 and negative 1, because when you add them, you get negative 2. So now I have my factor. Well, I know my factor is going to be x minus 1 squared, because my factors are just x minus 1 and then x minus 1, which is just x minus 1 squared. So there's only one solution, and that's going to be x equals 1. So the answer is going to be C. Question 15. The functions g and h are defined above. What is the value of h of 0? Alright, well h of 0 means I'm plugging in a 0 for x. So now I need g of 0. That's the first thing I got to do. So I put g of 0. I'm putting 0 in for x. 2 times 0 is 0. So now I get negative 1, right? So I have negative 1 equals g of 0. So now I have 1 minus my negative 1. 1 minus my negative 1 will give me my h of 0. Well, 1 minus negative 1, that's the same as 1 plus 1, which gives me 2, equals my h of 0. So my answer is D. Question 16. If a is a solution of the above equation and a is greater than 0, so a is positive, what is the value of a? Alright, well, I have x squared plus x minus 12 equals 0. So I need factors of 12, or factors of negative 12, so I'll put negative 12 here. I need factors of negative 12 that add to 1. So that's really a 1 there. It's not shown because it's just x, but you should just know. So we have negative 12. We need factors of it that add to 1. Well, that means I'm going to need negative 3 and then positive 4, because 4 minus 3 gives me 1. So now I can go ahead and write out my factors. I'm going to have x plus 4, and then I'm going to have x minus 3. But I need my positive factor, my positive 0, right? So my 0, my x plus 4, I know x will equal negative 4. My x minus 3 will mean that x will equal 3. I need my positive answer. My positive answer is x equals 3, so my answer will be 3. Question 17. The sum of negative 2x squared plus x plus 31 and 3x squared plus 7x minus 8 can be written in the form ax squared plus bx plus c, where a, b, and c are constants. What is the value of a plus b plus c? Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and add my equations first off. So I got negative 2x squared, and then I have plus 3x squared, and then I have my plus x, and plus 7x, and then plus 31, and then minus 8. Now I go ahead and add them. Well, negative 2x squared plus 3x squared leaves me with only x squared. And then I have x plus 7x, which gives me plus 8x. And then I have 31 minus 8, which gives me plus 23. Alright, now I've got a. My a value is 1. My b value is 8. And my c value is 23. I know that 1 plus 8 is 9, and I know that 9 plus 23 is 32. So 32 is my answer. Question 18. If xy satisfies the system of equations above, what is the value of y? Well, look here. This is what I was just telling you guys in the problem a couple ago, right? We need to get rid of our variable by adding, right? So it's already lined up for us. So when you see this, you should get excited because you should know you can solve it very quickly. So we have negative x plus x, that's 0. 0x, we don't even have to include the x because it's times 0. And then we have y plus 3i, well that's going to give us 4y. I'm going to put that down here so you can see it better. And then we have negative 3.5 plus 9.5. Well, that's the same as 9.5 minus 3.5, which is 6. Now I divide each side by 4 to solve for y. So I get y equals 6 over 4, which can be simplified to 3 over 2. So my answer will be 3 over 2. Question 19. A startup company opened with 8 employees. The company's growth plan assumes that 2 new employees will be hired each quarter, every 3 months, for the first 5 years. If an equation is written in the form y equals ax plus b to represent the number of employees y employed by the company x quarters after the company opened, what is the value of b? Guys, b is just the value they're starting with, right? And they're just starting with 8 employees. So our answer is just 8, right? So that one's really easy, honestly. Question 20. In the circle above, point A is the center, and the length of arc BC is 2/5 of the circumference of the circle. What is the value of x? Alright, well we know that our arc length BC is 2/5 of the circumference. Well, if our arc length is 2/5 of the circumference, then our angle x will be 2/5 of our total angle, right? Well, we know the total angle in a circle is 360. And we know our angle x is 2/5 of that. So we have 2/5 times 360 over 1. We can go ahead and factor out. So what we're going to get is we're going to get our 5 and our 360. Well, we know 360 is divisible by 5. So we know how many 5s go into 360. Well, we know that 5 goes into 360 times. And then 5 goes into 50 10 more times. So now we're at 70. And then we know 5 goes into 10 2 more times. So we get 72. So now we have 2 times our 72 over our 1 times 1, which is 1. 2 times 72 is 144 over 1. So our answer will be 144. Thank you for watching Preeminent Test Prep. Make sure to subscribe, like, and share as we will be releasing more videos to help you prepare for the SAT.